Can you trust your best friend? A quiet suburban neighborhood was peaceful at dusk. Suddenly, police sirens shattered the calm. A shocking crime occurred, revealing the hidden darkness in a seemingly perfect friendship. Trust was broken, and betrayal lurked behind every corner. What happened when the truth came out? What if your best friend had a dark secret? How far would you go to uncover the truth? Ella was a young journalist with big dreams. She worked hard to make a name for herself. Her desk at the local newspaper was filled with notes, clippings, and ideas for stories. She was passionate about uncovering the truth, no matter how difficult it was. Every morning she arrived early, eager to find the next big scoop. Ella believed that good stories could change the world. She felt that if she could get one break, everything would change for her. But the pressure was high. She often felt the weight of expectations on her shoulders. Her colleagues were talented, and competition was fierce. Still, Ella pushed herself. She wanted to be respected in the field and would do anything to prove herself. Sophie, her best friend, was her biggest support. She was charming, beautiful, and magnetic, the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking in. Ella admirò su confianza y energía. They spent hours talking about their dreams and ambitions. Sophie encouraged Ella to pursue her goals and always believed in her talent. But there was more to Sophie than met the eye. Behind her bright smile was a mysterious past. Ella sensed that Sophie held secrets but never pressed her friend for details. Their friendship was built on trust, and Ella respected Sophie's boundaries. Yet, as Ella dug deeper into her work, she couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was hidden beneath Sophie's perfect exterior. Ella's mentor, Mark, often cautioned her about mixing friendship with work. He had years of experience in journalism and knew the risks well. "Be careful, Ella," he said one day. "Personal relationships can cloud your judgment. You have to stay objective." Mark had seen friendships crumble when ambition took over. His warnings echoed in Ella's mind, but she dismissed them. She believed her bond with Sophie was strong enough to withstand anything. Mark had a keen eye for detail. He taught Ella to look for clues that others missed, how to ask the right questions, and how to uncover hidden truths. Ella respected him deeply and wanted to impress him. She often sought his advice and feedback on her stories. But despite his guidance, she couldn't shake her curiosity about Sophie. Jake, Sophie's partner, was charming but possessive. He had a way of making people feel comfortable, but there was a shadow behind his smile. Ella had always felt a bit uneasy around him. He kept a close eye on Sophie, often hovering protectively when they were together. At first, Ella thought it was sweet, but as time passed, she noticed how controlling Jake could be. He didn't like Sophie spending too much time away from him, especially if it meant being with Ella. Sophie often brushed off Ella's concerns about Jake. "He's just protective," she would say with a smile. "He cares about me." Ella wanted to believe her friend, but something didn't feel right. The way Jake looked at Sophie sometimes made Ella uncomfortable. It was as if he saw her as a possession rather than a partner. Despite these feelings, Ella valued her friendship with Sophie. They shared laughter, dreams, and late-night talks. Sophie was there for Ella during tough times, and Ella supported Sophie in return. But as Ella started investigating a series of strange events in their town, she found herself torn between her loyalty to Sophie and her growing curiosity about her friend's hidden life. Ella's instincts as a journalist pushed her to dig deeper. She began to gather information about Sophie's past. She found clues that hinted at a troubled family history and connections to people involved in crime. It was unsettling. Ella felt conflicted. She didn't want to betray Sophie's trust, but her journalist's curiosity urged her forward. As Ella balanced her work and her friendship, she began to notice changes in Sophie. She seemed more anxious, often looking over her shoulder as if someone was watching her. The carefree laughter they used to share faded, replaced by a tense atmosphere. Ella knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how to approach it. Ella's journey was just beginning. The more she uncovered, the more complicated things became. She was determined to protect her friend, but she also wanted to know the truth. As she navigated the murky waters of friendship, ambition, and betrayal, Ella faced a choice that could change everything. In her heart, she hoped for a happy ending, but deep down, she feared that secrets often led to darkness. Would she find the truth, or would it cost her everything she held dear? Only time would tell. What happens when a close friendship hides dark secrets? Are you ready to uncover the truth? Ella and Sophie were inseparable. They shared dreams, laughter, and secrets. Every Saturday, they met at their favorite cafe. They sipped coffee and talked about their futures. Ella wanted to be a top journalist. Sophie dreamed of traveling the world. Their bond felt strong, almost unbreakable. But sometimes Ella sensed something was off. Sophie would get quiet when certain topics came up. She avoided talking about her family and past. Ella se preguntó por qué Sophie guardaba esos partes de su vida escondidos. They shared everything else, so why not this? The thought nagged at Ella, but she pushed it aside. She trusted Sophie completely. What dark truths lie hidden in a friend's past? Are you ready to follow Ella as she uncovers shocking secrets? Ella decided to investigate Sophie's past. She felt a mix of worry and curiosity. She wanted to protect her friend, but she also needed to know the truth. Ella started digging through old news articles and social media. What she found surprised her. Sophie had come from a troubled family. There were stories of fights and problems. Ella learned that Sophie's father had been in and out of jail. Her mother struggled with addiction. These details changed how Ella saw her friend. Sophie's perfect life was not what it seemed. As Ella continued her search, she stumbled upon strange incidents connected to Sophie. There were reports of suspicious people seen near her home. Some were known for trouble. One name kept coming up: Tony. He had a history with gangs. Ella felt a chill as she read about him. Sophie had spent time with him, and it worried her. Ella's heart raced. What was Sophie doing with someone like Tony? The more Ella uncovered, the more questions she had. She wondered if Sophie was in danger or if she was involved in something darker. One evening, Ella found an old photo of Sophie with Tony. They looked close, smiling together. It sent a wave of fear through Ella. Was Sophie hiding more than just a troubled past? The secrets were piling up, and Ella knew she had to confront Sophie. But how could she ask her friend about these dangerous ties? Ella felt torn. She wanted to help, but the truth could shatter their friendship. The stakes were higher than ever. What happens when the truth comes to light? Are you ready to witness the fallout of a shattered friendship? Ella sat at her desk, her heart racing. She had gathered so much information about Sophie, and the secrets weighed heavily on her. She knew it was time to confront her friend. Ella took a deep breath and called Sophie. They agreed to meet at their cafe, where they had shared so many happy moments. When Sophie arrived, she seemed different. Her smile was tight, and her eyes darted around the room. Ella felt a knot in her stomach. She wanted to ask her friend about Tony and the secrets, but how could she start? After a few minutes of small talk, Ella couldn't hold back any longer. "Sophie, I found some things about your past, about Tony," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Sophie's face changed in an instant. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone sharp. "What have you been looking at?" Ella felt a rush of anxiety. "I found the articles, the pictures. You didn't tell me about your family, about Tony. I'm worried about you." Sophie's defensiveness grew. "You don't understand. You don't know anything about my life," she shouted. The cafe felt tense and quiet. Ella's heart sank. This was not how she imagined the conversation would go. Ella tried to stay calm. "I just want to help you, Sophie. But I can't do that if you won't be honest with me." Sophie crossed her arms and looked away. "Maybe I don't need your help. Maybe you should mind your own business." Her words felt like a slap. Ella's chest tightened. The friendship they had built over the years felt like it was slipping away. Ella felt betrayed. Why couldn't Sophie just talk to her? Why was she hiding so much? As the days passed, Sophie's behavior became more strange. She started canceling plans and acting distant. Ella noticed Sophie looking over her shoulder as if she were afraid of someone. It made Ella uneasy. She began to fear for Sophie's safety. One night, Ella saw Sophie in town. She was with a group of people and one of them was Tony. Ella's heart raced. She felt sick. Sophie looked nervous and Tony was too close. Ella wanted to approach them, but fear held her back. What if Sophie got angry again? The next day, Ella received a call from Mark, her mentor. "Ella, I've heard some troubling things about Sophie," he said. "You need to be careful." His words echoed in her mind. She felt a growing sense of dread. That evening, Ella decided to talk to Sophie again. She wanted to clear the air, but she also felt she had to protect her friend. She called Sophie and asked to meet. When they sat down, Ella noticed Sophie looked worn out. Her eyes were shadowed, and she fidgeted with her hands. "Sophie, please, I'm scared for you. What is going on?" Sophie sighed. "You wouldn't understand, Ella. You don't know what I've been through." Her voice trembled, and for a moment, Ella thought she might break down. "I want to understand, I want to help, but you have to let me in," Ella pleaded. Sophie hesitated. "I can't. You'll hate me if you knew the truth." Ella felt a wave of sadness wash over her. "I could never hate you, but I can't stand by and watch you hurt. Please, tell me." Sophie shook her head. "I can't do this. You'll regret it." Then she stood up and left the cafe without another word. Ella watched her go, heart heavy. The fracture in their friendship felt real. Ella knew they were at a breaking point. Secrets could destroy them. She had to find a way to protect Sophie, even if it meant stepping into dangerous waters herself. What happens when a murder shakes a quiet neighborhood? Are you ready to uncover the truth behind the crime? The morning news brought shocking headlines. Jake, Sophie's partner, was found dead. Ella couldn't believe it. She stared at the screen in disbelief. The report said it was a murder. Panic spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People whispered and pointed fingers. Ella felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered how possessive Jake had been. She thought about the tense moments she had witnessed between him and Sophie. The thought that Sophie might be involved made her stomach turn. The police arrived at the scene quickly. They cordoned off the area and began their investigation. Ella watched from her window, her heart racing. She wanted to rush to Sophie, but she also felt frozen. What if Sophie had done something terrible? As the day wore on, news spread through the community. People were scared. Families locked their doors. The once quiet streets were filled with murmurs of fear. Ella felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Later that day, she decided to go to Sophie's house. She needed to see her friend, but when she arrived, the police were already there. They were talking to Sophie, asking her questions. Ella's heart sank. She felt like she was about to witness something awful. Sophie looked pale and shaken. She was pacing back and forth. Ella wanted to rush in and hug her, but she knew it wasn't the right time. Instead, she stood back and listened. The police officer asked Sophie about her whereabouts the night before. Ella held her breath, hoping Sophie would give a solid answer. "I was at home," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "I didn't see Jake after work." The officer wrote down notes, but Ella noticed the look in his eyes. He seemed skeptical. Ella felt a knot in her stomach. She wanted to believe Sophie, but doubts crept in. When the police left, Ella approached Sophie. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Sophie looked at her with wide eyes. "No, I'm not okay. Jake is dead, and they think I did it." Ella felt a wave of fear. "They don't know anything for sure. You need to stay calm." Sophie shook her head. "I can't stay calm. I was with Tony. I didn't do it, but they will think I did." Ella's mind raced. Tony again? The connections were getting more tangled. "You need to tell them everything, Sophie. You need to be honest," Ella urged. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I can't. They won't understand. They'll just see the past." Ella felt torn. She wanted to help Sophie, but the truth was getting darker. What if Sophie had been involved in some way? The thought made her sick. As night fell, Ella lay awake, unable to shake the images of the day. The crime had shaken her world. She thought about the neighborhood. Friends were now strangers, and fear hung in the air. The next morning, the police released a statement. They announced that evidence pointed towards Sophie. The news hit Ella like a punch. Her heart raced. She felt panic rising within her. She wanted to believe Sophie was innocent, but the weight of the evidence loomed large. Ella luchó con su conciencia. Loyalty to her friend battled with the need for the truth. What would she do if Sophie was guilty? How could she protect her friend? Ella knew she had to dig deeper. The crime had changed everything. Secrets were coming to light, and the search for answers had only just begun. How does a community heal after a shocking crime? Are you ready to see the fallout of loyalty and truth? The neighborhood was on edge. People whispered in hushed tones. Fear filled the air like a thick fog. Families kept their doors locked tight. The murder of Jake had shaken everyone. Ella felt the weight of her investigation. She had spent countless hours digging into Sophie's past. Now, the truth seemed more critical than ever. But the truth was complicated. Ella was scared. What if Sophie was involved? What if she was innocent? Media coverage escalated quickly. News vans parked outside the cafe where Ella and Sophie used to meet. Reporters shouted questions, desperate for a story. Ella watched from her window, her heart heavy. She felt like a ghost in her own life. The news reports focused on Sophie. They painted her as a suspect. Ella felt a mix of anger and sadness. She wanted to defend her friend but didn't know how. Each news segment made the situation worse. The community was turning against Sophie. Ella knew she had to do something. She started writing articles, trying to share Sophie's side of the story. She wanted people to see the real Sophie, the one she knew. But each word felt like a battle. She was torn between loyalty and the truth. Every time Ella wrote, she felt the weight of her choices. If she wrote too much, she might hurt Sophie. If she wrote too little, she would let lies spread. It was a tightrope walk, and Ella feared she might fall. At home, Ella replayed conversations in her mind. She thought about the secrets Sophie had kept. The picture of Sophie with Tony haunted her. Was Sophie hiding something dangerous? As days turned into weeks, the tension in the neighborhood grew. People looked at each other with suspicion. Friends became enemies. Ella felt the pressure rising. She wanted to help Sophie, but every choice felt risky. One evening, Ella met Mark for coffee. He was worried about the impact of the story. "Ella, you need to be careful," he said. "You can't let your emotions cloud your judgment." Ella nodded but felt frustrated. "I want to protect Sophie, but the truth matters too. What if she's guilty?" Mark sighed. "It's not easy. But remember, you're a journalist. You have a duty to report what you find." Ella left the cafe feeling lost. She wanted to help Sophie, but feared what the truth might bring. Each day was a struggle between friendship and duty. The next morning, Ella sat down to write. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to shout the truth from the rooftops, but fear held her back. She thought about Sophie's face, filled with worry. Ella knew she needed to talk to Sophie again. They needed to have an honest conversation. Ella picked up her phone and called. "Sophie, can we meet? I need to talk to you." When they sat down, the air was thick with tension. Ella looked into Sophie's eyes, searching for answers. "I want to help you, but I need to know everything. You have to trust me," she said. Sophie looked scared. "I can't tell you everything, Ella. It's too dangerous." Ella's heart sank. The truth was slipping through her fingers. She felt trapped between her loyalty to Sophie and her duty as a journalist. The aftermath of the crime was more complicated than she ever imagined. In that moment, Ella knew one thing. She had to find a way to protect her friend while also uncovering the truth. But the path ahead was dark and uncertain. What happens when the police dig deeper into a friend's life? Are you ready to uncover the shocking evidence? The police inquiry began the next day. Ella felt nervous as she sat in the small, cold room at the station. Detectives asked her questions about Sophie. Ella was a witness, but she felt uneasy. She wanted to help, but also worried about what they might find. "Where were you the night Jake was killed?" one detective asked. Ella took a deep breath. "I was at home, watching TV," she replied. "I didn't see Sophie that night." The detective nodded, taking notes. "What can you tell us about your friend? Do you know if she was in trouble?" Ella hesitated. She wanted to protect Sophie, but she knew she had to be honest. "Sophie has had a tough past," she admitted. "But I don't think she would hurt anyone." The detective looked at her closely. "You need to understand, Ella. We are looking for the truth. If you know anything, it's important to tell us." Ella felt the pressure. She thought about the secrets Sophie had kept, but she didn't want to betray her friend. "I promise. I will let you know if I hear anything," she said softly. After the interview, Ella left the station feeling heavy. She walked through the neighborhood, her mind racing. The detectives were uncovering layers of Sophie's life that Ella hadn't known. What would they find? What secrets lay hidden? That evening, the news reported that police had found surveillance footage. The video showed Sophie near the crime scene on the night of the murder. Ella felt a jolt of fear. She couldn't believe it. Sophie had been there. Ella watched the news with a sinking heart. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Sophie was walking quickly, glancing around nervously. Ella's stomach twisted. What was she doing there? The news anchor spoke. Police are investigating Sophie as a potential suspect. She was near the scene at the time of the crime. Ella felt sick. The more the media reported, the more the community turned against Sophie. Ella's phone buzzed with messages from friends. They were scared and angry. "Did you see the news? Is Sophie guilty?" One text read. Ella no sabía cómo responder. She wanted to defend her friend, but the evidence was piling up against her. The next day, Ella met with Sophie. They sat in a quiet corner of a park. Ella wanted to give her friend a chance to explain. "Sophie, I saw the footage." "Why were you there?" she asked gently. Sophie looked panicked. "I didn't mean to be there. I was just passing through. I swear I didn't do anything." Ella felt a mix of relief and fear. "You need to tell the police everything. They will find out anyway," she urged. Sophie shook her head, tears in her eyes. I can't tell them about Tony. They'll think I'm involved in something worse." Ella's heart raced. The name Tony kept coming up. "Sophie, you have to trust me. I'm your friend, but you need to be honest with the police." The tension was thick. Ella felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She knew that every decision mattered. As days passed, the investigation grew more intense. Ella luchó para equilibrar su lealtad a Sophie y la verdad que necesitaba descubrir. Each new piece of evidence felt like a step closer to disaster. Ella realized she had to dig deeper herself. If Sophie was innocent, Ella needed to find proof. She couldn't just sit back and let the police decide Sophie's fate. The stakes were too high, and time was running out. What happens when a best friend is arrested for murder? Are you ready to witness the shocking fallout? The day of Sophie's arrest was tense. Ella stood on the street, her heart pounding. She watched as police cars lined the block. Detectives surrounded Sophie, their faces serious. It felt like a scene from a movie, but it was real. Sophie looked scared. Ella felt a mix of emotions: betrayal, sorrow, and fear. She had spent years believing in Sophie, but now everything felt different. The police led Sophie away in handcuffs. Ella wanted to scream but couldn't find her voice.
"Why, Sophie?" she whispered, feeling tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" The crowd around Ella grew. Neighbors watched, some with expressions of disbelief. Others looked angry. They whispered among themselves, pointing at Sophie as she was taken to the police car. Ella felt her heart break. As the car drove away, the weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. Ella se dio cuenta de que la amistad que habían construido estaba desmoronándose. She could feel the eyes of the community on her. They all had opinions. Some believed Sophie was innocent, while others saw her as a monster. In the days that followed, the neighborhood was divided. Some people put up signs in support of Sophie. "Free Sophie," they said. Others joined groups calling for justice. "She must pay for what she did," they shouted. Ella felt lost in the chaos. Social media exploded with comments. Friends turned against each other, arguing online. Some said Sophie was a victim of her past. Others claimed she was dangerous and needed to be locked away. Ella read every post, feeling the tension rise. Ella wanted to defend her friend, but how could she? The evidence against Sophie was strong. The surveillance footage showed her near the crime scene, and the police were sure of their case. Ella felt torn between loyalty and the harsh reality of the situation. One evening, Ella met with Mark for coffee. She needed his advice. "What should I do, Mark? I want to help Sophie, but I don't know how," she said, her voice shaky. Mark looked serious. "You need to find the truth, Ella. Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. It's important to look at the facts."
Ella nodded but felt overwhelmed. The truth was hard to face. The next day, she decided to visit Sophie in jail. She wanted to understand what really happened. Sitting in the small visiting room, Ella waited anxiously. When Sophie entered, she looked different, defeated. Ella's heart ached for her friend. "Sophie," Ella said softly, "I'm here for you. Please tell me the truth. What happened?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't do it, Ella, I swear. I was scared and confused. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Ella felt a flicker of hope. "Then we need to find a way to prove it. I believe you." Sophie shook her head. "It's too late. No one will believe me now. The community has already decided." Ella felt a surge of determination. "I will fight for you. I will find the truth." As she left the jail, Ella knew she had a long road ahead. The community was divided, and the case against Sophie was strong. But she was ready to dig deep. Ella wouldn't give up on her friend. She had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. What happens when a trial uncovers deep secrets? Are you ready to witness the courtroom drama unfold? The courtroom was tense. Each day brought new secrets about Sophie's life. Witnesses spoke, and more about her past came to light. Ella sat in the back, heart racing. When it was her turn to testify, she felt the weight of the moment. "What do I say?" she wondered. She had to balance her loyalty to Sophie with the truth. As Ella spoke, she faced her own dilemmas. She wanted to help her friend, but knew the truth could hurt. The tension in the room was thick. Everyone waited for answers, and Ella felt trapped in her choices. The jury found Sophie guilty. The trial revealed complex motives, leaving everyone questioning justice. Ella felt a wave of sadness and guilt. She reflected on their friendship and the choices that led them here. It was hard to accept that things could never be the same again. Ella visited Sophie in prison. They faced the truth together, acknowledging their broken friendship. At that moment, Ella felt a mix of emotions: sadness, regret, and a glimmer of hope for healing. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more.